welcome back to the makeup chair. So I was asked on my Twitter, would I share how I actually edit my pictures? I mentioned a couple of times I like using flash photography, and I wanted to kind of explain to you how that whole thing works. So we're going to switch over to voiceover mode and let's get started. This is the video that we are creating a thumbnail and picture for Instagram for, and I always like to keep the video in mind just to make sure that it's going to work and represent what the video is all about. So I'm just going to keep that to one side, and I've taken a bunch of different pictures, both of these with different levels of flash. So this is high flash and then low flash. And you can see in the low flash one how it just does not show up what was represented in the video. You've got all this unusual texture, it's very dark, it's very dull, and this is what bad lighting can do. Even if you take the makeup away and just look at the rest of the skin, it looks very uneven, very blotchy, the fabric looks really cheap, and the makeup itself does not look good. It is not representing what it looked like in real life. It's too dark, it looks very uneven, and then you have quite strong flash. So it's in the same mode, it's just using a different type of flash. My camera just kind of makes up its mind about how it's going to take the picture, and you can see my skin just looks a lot more even. It looks more like it did in real life. The fabric looks better. There's a great shine to the picture. It looks more even overall. My hair looks really glossy. The makeup itself is a little washed out, particularly or maybe around the eyebrows, and you can't see some of the blending. But the great thing is I can go and add those back in, but we're not going to have to add in any light, and we're not going to lose anything really, because we can just add in a little bit more texture and tone, and that kind of represents the video more than the other pictures does. So if we just have a look at the side by side, that pretty much looks like the video. It's a little brighter and a little bit more crisp, but that is what you would get from a video footage. So compared to a moving image, it's just not going to pick up the same sort of textures and tones and stuff, but they are very, very similar. So I'm obviously going to go with a lighter one so I can then add stuff in rather than going with that really dark, dull one. Try out different flashes with your lighting to make sure you find out what's going to work for you. And let's move on to the editing part. So I edit my pictures using picmonkey, and this will look like an ad for picmonkey, but it's not. I pay every month for this service, but it is really good. So I'm going to open up the image in picmonkey, and the first thing I like to do is play around with the exposure. There's lots of different things to choose from, but the exposure will just add in a little bit more shadow or contrast. If I went for the darker image, I could brighten it and highlight it, but I find it's just easier to go for the contrast and the shadow. That's just my personal way of doing it. You can also play around with the color saturation as well. That's another great one, particularly for makeup, in order to make sure that everything is showing up really well. So you might want to add a little bit more saturation. You might want to warm it up or cool it down. Whatever you need to do in order to represent what the actual look was like in real life. And it's a good idea to keep an eye on that video footage just to see where you are. I think we're going to need a little bit of saturation here because it's looking a bit duller compared to the actual video itself. So once we've done that, I then move on to touch-ups, and I want to have a look at these brows because they're looking a little bit washed out. One of them looks fine because of the way the flash hit it, the other one not so much. And just by adding in a little mascara, it will pick up the black tones in the picture, and it's not about adding anything, it's just about brightening and lifting what's already there. So I like to keep the video side by side and just check how it looks in the video, then how it looks in the picture, and make sure they match up pretty well. And to me, this isn't the typical photoshopping a picture. You're really just trying to make it look like it did in real life or how it did on video. I also want to brighten up around the eye area because I'm noticing it's not as sharp as I want it to be. But here I want to make sure that I don't go too over the top with this. I see a lot of people brightening up their eyes, which is fine, but you gotta make sure you're not overdoing it. I keep to a 10% rule. So I never change a picture more than 10% for each time that I use something. In this regard, I actually only did 5% because I feel like even the 10% was maybe a little bit too much. But you want to kind of figure out what's going to work for you for that particular picture. A mistake that I see a lot of people making is they brighten up the eyes and they get a lot of the concentration on the eyes, but then they forget about the rest of the face. So I'm going to take that same brightening tool and just go around any areas that I want to lift so that the eyes aren't just the main focus and the eyes don't look so edited, that there's little areas of the face that are picked up on just as much. And this is a technique that a lot of people use to bring out their highlighter. Personally, once again, I stick to the 10% rule. I don't like overdoing the highlighter. It's fun and creative, but when it's a thumbnail, I want to make sure that it represents the actual video itself. But you can always play around with the settings and just kind of have a little bit of fun with it, particularly if you're not using it for any professional use and you're just doing it for yourself. Why not play around with it? And another way that you can use this tool is on jewelry. So if you want to make the jewelry pop, it's a great way to lift the picture ever so slightly, give it more of a crisp effect. And actually this jewelry did pop a lot in the video, so I wanted to make sure the same thing happened in the picture as well. The last thing that I usually do then is I go in and sharpen it. So I'm going to go in and sharpen up the image just to make sure that it has a little bit more of a crisp feel to it, particularly when you are editing and you're using it for like thumbnails or you're transferring it onto Instagram. You're going to lose a little bit of that clarity and a little bit of that sharpness. So I'm just going to add that in. And then sometimes when you have done the sharpened effect, you can see that the texture of the skin is maybe popping a little bit too much. So you see these little smile lines around my mouth. A lot of people would be tempted to go in and airbrush them. To me, it looks really artificial and really fake. You see how there's no texture in that area? It just doesn't work. I kind of like seeing the texture of the skin. I think that that's really important. I know some people love to really, really heavily airbrush. So we're going to take away that completely. But if you are a bit worried about this and you want to just change it ever so slightly, go in and use a different color. So pick up a color that's right alongside it and then just go over that area. This will reduce the look of it so it's not as sharp, particularly because we sharpened it up. So you want to go back in, choose the same color, and just play around with the fade. So you can almost make them completely disappear just by using the corresponding color alongside it. But as always, I like to stick to the 10% rule, so I'm not going to go over the top with it. But once again, in real life, you can see those little lines. So even though online people will probably question me on it, I prefer you guys to see them than not see them. So I'm pretty happy with the overall look of everything here. I feel like it really pops and that's all fine. But what I want to do is go and do the edges now. This is something that I do for my Instagram in particular, not so much for my thumbnails, but I'll take the eye tint and I'll take the gray shade and I'll gray out all of the background. A little trick here, if you're trying to get it right, is actually to pick a color instead and to put the fade all the way up so you can see where it's going. So if you go over your cheeks or you go over your hair, you can kind of like see it a little bit better than using the gray. And then at the end, just switch back to the gray and you'll have a gray background. That way the main focus ends up being me rather than everything that's going on behind me. So that is pretty much it. I then just have a really good scan of what the video and the picture looks like. I feel like the eye makeup looks pretty good. I like the overall appearance. So I'm going to save that and then I'm going to go ahead and I can put that up on Instagram. But I want to then create my thumbnail for this video. And I'm going to go back into picmonkey and I'm going to open up the collage and I want to change this to 1280 and 720. And this is what the YouTube thumbnail size is. So I'm going to pop that in. I'm going to take away the spacing. You can add borders if you want to. And what I like to do is layer two pictures together. So I'll start off with my main picture that I want to be the main focus. So I'm going to put that into position. You'll see what I'm doing in a second. It'll make sense. And then going to go up and edit this. So it's going to go back into the editing that we were doing earlier. Now you do end up losing a little bit of clarity, but you can go back in and add that sharpness in again. What I'm then going to do is add an overlay. So I'm going to go and upload the same picture. Sometimes I'll do like a before and after, or I'll do it from a different angle. And I'll just like pop that in alongside it. And then what I do is I fade in the edges. So you end up with like an overlay with the same background pretty much. It takes a little time to kind of get used to all of this kind of stuff, but you'll manage it in the end. It's pretty easy to do and it does make quite a good difference rather than having just a side-by-side picture. Another thing that I like to do is sometimes make the original image pop first because that keeps the kind of clarity and the sharpness. So I'll put that first and pop that shoulder in the front. And another way that you can make it pop is to just grab a couple of shapes and just go around it. It's a little tedious and I'm sure there's other ways that you can do this, but I just do this on picmonkey because I'm used to it now. But it's just a way to make everything pop that little bit more. So I just use a bunch of shapes and I just go around the edges and I keep adding them, moving them around, fading them in and out of one another. And then you kind of get that pop. Now I'm going to add in my text about what I want to say this look is. I find this is great if you're sharing like on Facebook and stuff so people know what it is rather than going to YouTube. Keep that shadow on. And you can do like different fonts. I do different sizes and different fonts for each level. You can also add in other words like this is a get ready with me. So I'm going to put get ready with me. And I'm going to change the font and I'm going to change also the shadow as well because I want the shadow. I want it to look quite different from the text underneath. The text underneath is like what the video is, but this is sort of like extra info. You can add some emojis and stuff in here too. Have a little bit of fun with it. Add a bit of shadow to them too, which is a great way to make them pop. And then you want to go in and make sure all of those are combined. Sharpen it up again. and then you've pretty much got your thumbnail. So that is how I edit my pictures for Instagram and for my YouTube channel. Definitely let me know if you have any questions about this, you want to know any more. I'm here to help as always, so I'll see you guys in my next one. Don't forget to hit subscribe. Bye!